This is the central lie of the Obama era. Because Barack Obama had a supermajority at one point.
This is a myth that refuses to die. Sadly, it comes from the GOP. The Democrats never had a supermajority in the Senate. There was a window of a few months, between the time Al Franken was finally sworn in and when the late Senator Kennedy's seat would be filled by a Republican, that the Democrats had 58 seats. If you assume the two independent candidates were voting with Democrats, then you can assume a supermajority during these few months. But in fact, it was independent Senator Joe Lieberman who threatened to support the GOP in filibustering the public option. Okay, I never thought I'd spend a video debunking something Kyle Kulinski said. For years now, he's been one of my go-to channels. Unfortunately, he sometimes gets a little sloppy with the facts, and in this case, it's a doozy because it provides cover for 8 years of GOP obstruction. In his latest video, he repeats the falsehood that Obama had a supermajority. From here, he goes on to blame Obama for not passing a version of the healthcare plan that the GOP would have filibustered. This creates a false equivalence, and I can't help but wonder if the GOP understands this. That they know we Americans have a short memory, and that even champions of progressive policies will forget or overlook the fact that it was Republicans who blocked these bills and simply turn on Obama. I guess it's true what they say, about the left eating its own. But before we get to it, don't forget to tap or click the subscribe button and bell icon. Okay, let's get to it.
So what's the lie, and what's the thing I have issue with here? He says, hey, every issue you care about is impacted in this upcoming election. So he's saying you got to get out there and vote. Then he says, hey, when I was president, I could only do what Congress and the Senate lets me do.
Correct. During Obama's tenure, the Democrats passed hundreds of bills through the House. Bills that the GOP either defeated or filibustered in the Senate. This is how it works. The Senate actually has to pass those bills, and Republican senators were blocking those bills.
So that's an argument of, you got to give the Democrats overwhelming victories, because if you give us the overwhelming victories, then we can get done what you want us to get done. That's what he's saying.
True, give the Democrats enough voices in the Senate and many of these bills can finally get pushed through.
This is the central lie of the Obama era. Because Barack Obama had a supermajority at one point.
This is a myth that refuses to die. Sadly, it comes from the GOP. The Democrats never had a supermajority in the Senate. There was a window of a few months, between the time Al Franken was finally sworn in and when the late Senator Kennedy's seat would be filled by a Republican, that the Democrats had 58 seats. If you assume the two independent candidates were voting with Democrats, then you can assume a supermajority during these few months. But in fact, it was independent Senator Joe Lieberman who threatened to support the GOP in filibustering the public option.
Finally, we have less than a minute left. The House passed health care. What do you think of the bill they passed? And do you still intend, if there is a public option and if there's this tax on so-called Cadillac health plans, will you support a Republican filibuster on final passage in the Senate?
Well, there's some good things in the House passed plan. You know, I think we ought to do health care reform this year to deal with the two great problems that President Obama and others have talked about. There are unsustainable, continuing increases in the cost of health care. We've got to stop that. And there are millions of Americans who don't have health insurance. But I'm afraid that our colleagues in the House added a lot onto that subtract from the genuine purposes of health care reform. And one was to create a public option plan. The public option plan is unnecessary. It has been put forward, I'm convinced, by people who really want the government to take over all of health insurance. They got a right to do that. I think that would be wrong. But worse than that, we have a problem even greater than the health insurance problems, and that is a debt. $12 trillion today, projected to be $21 trillion in 10 years.
So at this point, I take it you're a no vote in the Senate.
If the public option plan is in there, as a matter of conscience, I will not allow this bill to come to a final vote, because I believe the debt can break America and send us into a recession that's worse than the one we're fighting our way out of today. I don't want to do that to our children and grandchildren.
Senator Lieberman, thank you.
Even after all of this, Senators Chuck Schumer and Jay Rockefeller made last-minute attempts to introduce amendments to include a public option before the signing of the bill. So Kyle is simply engaging in revisionism, no doubt unwittingly, and thereby providing cover for the GOP, who was doing everything in their power to fight Obama on everything. Here are Mitch McConnell's infamous words.
Our top political priority over the next 2 years should be to deny President Obama a second term.
Not only did he not give us Medicare for all, he didn't even give us a public option. With a Democratic supermajority, they passed a Republican health care plan.
And from this false premise of the Democrats having a supermajority, Kyle goes on to offer his own narrative.
Let me repeat that. With a Democratic supermajority, they passed a Republican health care plan. You want to know why? Because Barack Obama wanted to pass a Republican health care plan.
Okay, let's tackle the Republican health care plan soundbite. These are the reasons this was not a Republican health care plan. First, the GOP never embraced it. Rather, the Democrats and independent voted it in despite their opposition. The GOP has been slowly killing this bill ever since. If the GOP actually wanted this health care plan, they could simply give it a slight makeover and introduce it under a different name, as Trump did with NAFTA. Lastly, we can see what an actual Republican health care plan looks like by simply observing the Republicans' proposed health care plan, which has no resemblance to Obamacare. The idea that Obamacare was a Republican health care plan is based on inference and non sequiturs. Yes, Mitt Romney passed something similar in Massachusetts, because regionally, Northeastern Republicans are reasonable compared to their national counterparts. It doesn't follow that this would have any GOP support on a national level. For example, as governor of Massachusetts, Mitt Romney was on record supporting indexing minimum wage to rise with inflation. Here he is being asked about it, and him giving the politically expedient answer, by not answering whether he'd support this as president.
I know in New Hampshire that they work to scale back minimum wage, and I haven't heard you talk about minimum wage on the trail. I was wondering what your position is.
My view has been to allow the minimum wage to rise with the CPI or with another index so that it adjusts automatically over time.
So you'd support that as president?
I've already indicated that when I was governor of Massachusetts, that was my view. Thanks.
Can you imagine any GOP president pushing this? Obviously not. Then there's the argument that it's the Heritage Foundation who wrote much of the concept for the Affordable Care Act. This is supposed to prove that this makes Obamacare a Republican plan. But the Heritage Foundation's proposal, which was proposed in the 90s, never had popular support with GOP politicians, even back in the 90s, when they were less crazy. I was pretty active during this time, phone banking and canvassing, trying to do my part in getting support for these bills. I was watching and paying attention to these political battles that were unfolding. The GOP broke the record on filibusters, and defeated bills like the Bring Jobs Home Act, which would have ended tax breaks for outsourcing, and incentivized companies to bring jobs back to the United States. You know, the types of bills that I would think Kyle would support. Then there is the American Jobs Act, which Obama proposed in 2011. This would have provided funding to modernize at least 35,000 public schools and community colleges, funding to protect the jobs of teachers, police officers, and firefighters, funding infrastructure projects, and more. According to Moody's, this would have created 1.9 million jobs. The bill was voted along party lines, meaning Republicans defeated the bill. So it's a bit disheartening to watch Kyle Kulinski repeat the false GOP argument about Obama having a supermajority. This just provides cover for the GOP and the lengths they went to stall and prevent progress.